Hi, it's Paul Antonelli here. What I'm going to talk about today is a subject that I think we're all interested in, and it's money. And what I found in all the different things that I've done in business and I've worked with a lot of people, helping them around running their business, but also having a bit of control over their financial aspect of their lives. And it's really interesting how maybe not understanding money as well as we could can make a really big difference. And there's a few basic principles that if you can get your head around, it can make a massive difference in the way that money and yourself engage and operate. So, because we've all got so much of an obsession out there around the idea of how much money can we make, how much money do we need. There's a lot around the idea of making money. So much. Start your own business, become an entrepreneur, do this, do that, hustle, all that sort of stuff. But what's missing, and you don't see it very often anywhere, and I think it's a bit of an issue, it's a major issue I think, is that once you start making money, even as you're starting to make money, how do you manage it? How do you control it so it doesn't actually take control of you and the control of your life? So that's what I wanted to touch base on a little bit. I think I'm pretty qualified to talk about this from the sense that I've done really bad money management. Yeah, in the nearly 30 years of business, I've lost a lot of money, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money. I've been bankrupt twice, and it's really hard. They're really difficult things to go through. And when that happens, it's not very pleasant, and it does make you really reflect on what went wrong. What would I do differently next time? What would I do differently next time? And so there's some key things to think about when you're considering money. Money, I remember hearing this from someone many years ago, and the expression was, money's made round to go round, not flat to stack. Interesting expression, isn't it? Money's made round to go round, not flat to stack. What does it mean? It means that money's made to move. So that's probably one of the first things to be aware of, that money is made to move. And so if you try to manage it or control money by keeping it static and keeping it all in one spot, then it's going to want to move. And so you have to almost create a bit of a process or a way to manage money that allows it to flow, allows it to move around, which is actually really important. So money's actually wants to flow, wants to move around. And so if you can let it move in the way that you manage and control your money, the better it is. And look, if you've been in business or thinking about going into business, and you talk to anyone who is in business, you'll find that one of the biggest issues with business is cash flow. They don't say, it's not necessarily sales, which can be an issue, but often it's cash flow. You might make sales, but I don't have enough cash and I've got to pay those bills. And cash flow is all about how much money do you have to put in to cover the cash gap between what you spend and what you get in until the business gets to a certain level. So one of my principles with money and business is to try to always drive a business and grow a business that's cash flow positive. And that basically means it controls both sides of the equation. So what it means is that you control cash in and you control the cash out, and there's a balancing act, but as long as what you're spending is less than what's coming in, then you should be fine. Because where you can get into a lot of trouble is where you end up borrowing money, overdrafts, credit cards. You go, it'll all be fine, it'll sort itself out in the wash, and it doesn't. And then you end up with a big gap, and it's really difficult. The way to think about debt in relation to money, and there's a lot of sort of discussion around debt. Is it bad? Is it good? Always use cash. It's pretty important to use debt. Depends on what you use. We have a lot of property portfolio, a lot of investment properties. So using debt for something like that, which you can leverage, makes a lot of sense. Using debt for things that, for example, like a holiday, doesn't make much sense, because at the end you've got some great memories, but you don't really have an asset. So understanding when to use debt and at what level is important. And think of debt. How much debt is enough? You always want to be able to get out, don't you? The idea is if you have too much debt, then you could get stuck in a bit of a hole. And the picture that I want to paint for you on this is, imagine you're actually digging a hole. So just imagine you've got a shovel, you've got the dirt, and you're digging a hole, and you start digging. And that hole represents the amount of debt that you have. Yeah. That hole represents the amount of debt that you have. And so you're digging. And initially, as you start digging, you get down and you've dug down to your knees. Can you get out of that hole? Yeah, it's pretty easy. You just basically step out of the hole. And then you keep digging, and now the hole is maybe up to your hips. Can you get out? Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to get out of that hole. You got to push your hands off and jump out, but you can still get out. You can actually get out. And then you keep digging, getting deeper. You keep digging, and now the debt is up to your waist. Yeah. And so can you get out? Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to get out of that hole now, but you can get out. You can still get out. Push yourself out and you can get out of that hole. And then if you keep digging into that hole and you go past your waist, then it becomes more difficult to get out of that hole. And that's actually how I view debt. It's not necessarily that debt is bad or debt is good. It's just how much debt you've got. A lot of that will depend on what stage of life and what you're trying to do and what your risk profile is. But I always keep in mind that a good level of debt is around waist level, which means that it's not excessive, but you can get out if you have to, which is really important. And so with money, using debt and to leverage debt can make a lot of difference to the way you run your life and you run your business. As I was mentioning before, money's made to flow around and it's not made to stack. And look, it happened the other day to me. I often say this. I pulled out a pair of shorts that I was wearing, hadn't worn them for, 4 or 5 days, and I pulled out of the pocket a $50 note. Interesting, isn't it? I just found this $50 note. Now, I hadn't actually missed it. It's not like I'd gone, where's that $50 gone? Did I drop it? Did I buy something with it? Where did it go? So it's really interesting that even though there was $50 sitting, and it could have sat in that pocket for a week or two, and so it had moved, that money had obviously changed, disappeared into my pocket, and pants went into the cupboard. And then when I found them again, oh, what a bonus, I found some cash. So it's really important to, and you've probably all done that before, where you dig out a pair of pants, you find some cash in it, you go, wow, that's amazing. You feel like it's a bonus. So that's important to understand, that when it moves and when it flows, and if you move some money around into a place that you can control it, then you don't miss it from the day-to-day stuff. It just doesn't happen. And I guess the way to think about that is, in life, stuff that you're doing, when something pops up, if you've got a car, something breaks down on the car, you just get it fixed. You go, I need to get that done. So you move money across that might have been for some other purpose, and you do that. And so one of the principles that I always focus on or use in my management of money is to flow some money into a spot so that it looks like it's been spent, but you've actually directed it into a spot for some future use. Yeah, which is an interesting way to do it. Because when you think, the way that money works is we can amass a lot of money, and they talk about this with the stats relating to people that have won the lottery. People that win the lotto, whether it's in Australia, in America, wherever it is, the stats, and I've done some research on this, is that around 80%, over 80% of people that win a large amount of money in the millions are pretty much broke after 5 years. And that's a very clear indicator that if you don't know how to manage money being dumped into someone's lap, more than likely the ability for them to maintain, hold it and grow it is going to be very small. That's just what the stats say. Bit of a stats guy, so that's just what the stats say. So learning, I'd really recommend you get your head around how to manage money and have a bit of a system for managing money, regardless of what level of income you've got. If you're not managing money when you've got a tight income and you're balancing your cash, then when it starts working, you're making a lot of money, it just gets worse. It actually gets worse. If you've got a little bit of money, it's painful. If you've got a lot of money and you don't know how to manage it, it actually can cause you so many issues, which in business. So there's some principles. I'm going to share more with you as we go forward, but there's some principles around the management of money. So just recapping what I've been chatting about, money wants to flow. So whatever system you develop, and I've got a particular framework that I'll talk about, you've got to allow the money to move around, which is really important. The other thing to consider with money is the fact that if you can push it and put it into different spots and give it the sense that it's moving, then you can control what that money's for, which is another way to think about the movement of money. And I just want you to frame up something. The other thing is level of debt. Yeah, it's important. I think it's important to use debt in different investments, making sure you're using debt. Make sure it's good debt, stuff that's going to grow and that's going to help you grow your revenue and grow your assets. But think about the level of debt. Waist height is good. If you go too far, then it can be really difficult to get out of that. And I can confirm that. Some of my experiences relating to really bad management of cash in the past. So there's some key principles to think about what money is. And the final thing I'm going to talk about, just wrap out a little bit, is that when you receive money, it's really interesting. We just think of it as money. It comes in, there's cash. And we don't get much cash nowadays. A lot of it's digital. But we don't see that money. We don't see that money that it has a different purpose or a different function. We just see it as money that comes in. For example, I pick up what's a really good way to look at it? If you've got a bit of cash that comes in, let's say here's a $50 note, $50 Australian note. You can see that. Nice notes. You got good notes. So when I look at that, it's just $50. Yeah, but actually, it's not just $50. So if I've earned that $50, when it comes to me, it's actually got multiple purposes, yeah? And those multiple purposes relate to a number of different things. So the first thing is that it can relate to different times. So some of that money, so if you think about the way that time works, we've got the past, the present, which is now, and the future. And some of that money then may be needed to be allocated for example, what that means is that I've got a loan, I borrowed some money from someone, I've bought something on a credit card. So as part of that money has to deal with a commitment that's taken place in the past, which is important. And so when it comes to me in the present, part of it has to deal with something that's taken place in the past. Yeah. Obviously, we use some of that money for the present, which is how most of the time go down. We buy something, we buy food, whatever it is that we do, entertainment. The thing that we also have to think about, that some of that money needs to be allocated for the future. Yeah, that's the other tense of time. So you've got the past, the present, and the future. And often it's the future that gets neglected. And so this money has multiple functions and purposes. So the first one relates to time, past, the present, and the future. And successful management of money is directing some cash into the past, some that you need now, but also setting some money aside for the future. Yeah. And the other thing is understanding that money is not necessarily all your money. So some of that money, for example, is for tax. If I earn money in our system, some of that money is for tax. So I've got to allocate that money, part of it. So let's say, 20% of that's for tax. If I think it's my money, I'm going to end up with a hole for the tax because it's not my money. In Australia, we have a goods and services tax, which is 10%. So as a business, 10% of the income that we earn is not our money. It's actually belongs to the government. So if I spend that money, then I create a gap or a hole, which is a real problem. So there's some things to think about, both in the tenses of time, past, present, and future, and also the fact that money itself comes to us and it already comes with different purposes and different functions. And if you can direct it so that it's enabled or it's allowed to do those different functions, you're going to manage your cash really well. And the ultimate aim when you're looking at controlling money, if you don't control money, and this is something I'm going to be really clear about, if you don't control money, regardless of whether you've got a little bit or a lot, it's going to actually control your life. It'll control where you need to be, what you do, how much stress you have, all that sort of stuff. So if you don't control cash, it will control you. I'm going to talk a little bit more. I've got a bit of a framework and a system which I'll share with you about how I think you should, what I've been using, and it works really effectively in the way that money gets used. But I really wanted to share just the basics of what money is. So hopefully you found that useful. If you've liked this, just subscribe and share it with your friends. And I'll be sharing more information around money and the relationship that you have with it. Thanks for now, and ciao for now until I see you next time.